I'm Norm Macdonald. Ask me anything. Hi.
Your Burt Reynolds is the best impersonation in SNL history. Did Burt find it funny?
Yeah, I'll take the condom thing for 8,000.
That's condiments.
Yes, he phoned me and told me he wanted to come on the show because I did Celebrity Jeopardy as Burt Reynolds. His idea was to come on the show, punch me in the face, replace me and then be even stupider. He talked to me on the phone, and he was even funnier in real life. He would just laugh all the time.
Norm, you've talked about the perfect joke being where the setup and punchline are identical. Have you ever come up with one?
Yes, the joke is Lyle Lovett and Julia Roberts were divorced today. The reason, he's Lyle Lovett, and she's Julia Roberts. That's the closest one.
Julia Roberts told reporters this week that her marriage to Lyle Lovett has been over for some time. The key moment, she said, came when she realized that she was Julia Roberts and that she was married to Lyle Lovett.
Hi Norm. I read your tweets about Roseanne Barr today and I was wondering if you wanted to elaborate about what a genius she is and why Hollywood is so tough for innovative thinkers.
I was just on Twitter talking about Roseanne because she gave me my first job, and I thought of her and Chappelle, who I have both worked with and who have both been called difficult or crazy. And that word crazy, when it's applied to an entertainer, can torpedo their career. One time I was on a show and I wanted to get Burt Reynolds to play my father, and the director said, "You don't want Burt Reynolds, he's crazy." I said, "I don't want you to be my director. I want Burt Reynolds." So crazy just means creative, and difficult just means hardworking and opinionated. And Roseanne was a victim to this specifically because she was a woman, which is very sad. But that's all I was saying.
Whenever I had anything, I go, get Burt Reynolds, like he'd be the coolest. And then people go, no, you don't want to work with him. He's crazy. And then I go, no, I do want to work with him. I don't want to fucking work with you. Yeah, right.
During your time as an SNL cast member, what was your favorite character to play?
Well, here's what I did. Victoria. Any sketch I would write, I would call my character Stan Hooper, and he didn't really do anything, you know? And I would be very careful to name him Stan Hooper, and then have someone in the sketch say, "Hey Stan Hooper." And one time I read a list of recurring characters and Stan Hooper was way up there. And of all the characters, he had no real qualities of any kind. Just a bland, empty vessel of man.
Norm, there are rumors that you are being considered to fill a possible vacancy as host of The Late Late Show. If you were to fill the position, who might be a suitable sidekick?
Oh, well, there's only one person I can think of, Adam Edgett, who would not be considered. But anyone else? Sure.
And tonight we have the great Tom Green on the show. We will be asking him questions, interviewing him. I will be interviewing him along with my trusty sidekick, Adam Egret.
It's Egret.
Egret.
Yeah, you know,
He's
yeah.
right.
Where is the strangest place someone has recognized you?
Well, let me answer this by asking a question. When I was on SNL, I played Burt Reynolds on Celebrity Jeopardy. One time, he, being me, playing he, refused to be called Burt Reynolds because he had changed his name to Turd Ferguson. So Alex Trebek had to call him Turd Ferguson. That became a little cult thing. So one time, I was in a very crowded street, and the street was 5th Avenue, which you know, at lunchtime how crowded it was, and there were hundreds of people watching as a gentleman yelled at me, "Hey turd." And I said, "Thank you. Thank you." And I always wondered what sort of relationship those people thought me and that fellow had.
Turd. So retarded.
Let's see you walking by.
Yes, they go, turd, turd. And then I go, "Thank you." And then everyone else goes, "What?" That's the oddest exchange I've ever heard.
Hey Norm. What are your thoughts on Artie Lang these days? Would you ever consider doing a dirty work too? Huge fan.
Yes. Wait, what? Yes, I would consider doing a dirty work too. But there's so much involved. I should start a Kickstarter. Because the problem is Dirty Work 1 lost so much money the movie studio had to shut down. MGM had a huge loss in their quarter, and the stock owners fled, and boy, you hear a lot about that on your answering machine. So I don't know if they want to make another one. But Artie is always hilarious.
Hi Norm. Big fan. In your DVD Me Doing Stand-Up, the audience was very dimly lit, if at all. Lots of specials do the opposite. Was this a specific choice of yours?
Oh yes. I didn't really want to have the audience showing at all, because I always hate it when I see that when I'm watching stand-up. So I didn't want to show the audience. And I didn't want to go out on a big laugh. I wanted to go out on silence. Because I've always hated big pretend laughter and shots of audience members laughing. So we did not like the audience. Although I still think they cut to them a couple times.
You ever actually say things that you're doing, your mind's so gone, you're like, I am you, my is going to
Are the moth joke and Bob Saget roast jokes from the same place?
Yes, they were. They were from the same book I have.
A moth goes into a podiatrist's office.
A moth goes into a podiatrist's office, all right?
You are correct. No, but Bob has a beautiful face, like a flower. Yeah, cauliflower. No offense, but your face looks like a cauliflower.
When I was a kid, my dad, when I was starting comedy, he gave me a book. It was very touching. He gave me a book that he had of jokes you say to people at their retirement parties.
Oh, really?
To help me with my stand-up. So it was very touching. It was close to...
If Hitler had a time machine, who do you think he'd go back and kill?
Oh, that's a good question. If Hitler had a time machine, who do you think he'd go back and kill? Him? Well, boy oh boy, that's a funnier question than I can deliver an answer to, I think. In a related story, I sent IAmA get in a time machine back to kill Hitler, and he became mesmerized by Hitler's black eyes. Adam says his eyes were deep black and inviting. So he came back with all sorts of decorations on him that Hitler had put him on for God knows what. He didn't get back for 4 years. I thought he'd be back in a day, but yeah. So IAmA get, he can show you a few goose steps now. But that's not really answering the question. Oh, I know he would kill the greatest man who ever lived, and also a Jew, the great Jesus Christ of Nazareth. That would be my answer.
Adolf Hitler, very compelling kind of a figure. Odd looking duck, but there's something about his eyes. Hypnotic. I think we should kill Hitler. Me and you go suicide, kill him.
Right. It's like he died 50 years ago, probably.
Did he? I didn't even know he was sick. People always fucking want to murder Hitler with their time machine, right? But then I feel if I got back there, I'd be afraid of falling under the spell of his fucking beautiful eyes.
I love the joke about Bill Cosby calling your dad. Did you ever talk to Cosby again after that?
Oh yes, that wasn't a joke, but what happened, Victoria, was, I opened for Bill Cosby. I told him my dad was a big fan. He said he would have my dad backstage when he went to a tour where my dad leaves, but my dad has been dead for 15 years. So he asks me for my dad's phone number, and I just write some numbers down on a piece of paper. He was such a nice guy, I didn't want to say he was dead. So I did hear from Cosby after that, because Cosby is so nice. I told that story one time on Letterman, and the next day at SNL I received like 200 things of flowers, and then about 2 weeks later I found on one flower way in the back a little card, and it was from Bill Cosby, and it said, "I'm sorry to inform you from this, but your dad is long since dead. He was very funny and nice also."
With the Twitterverse exploding with support for you to take over for Craig Ferguson, would you consider doing it if asked? And if you did take over, what direction would you take the show in? Would it be more weekend updatey? Follow-up question: waffles, pancakes or crepes?
This is an interesting number of questions. Victoria. Who was it that said, if nominated, I will not run, if elected, I will not serve? Whoever it was, they were an idiot. If nominated, I will run, and if elected, I will serve. But as we know, television is not a democracy but an oligarchy. They don't hire a lot of guys who run around saying oligarchy. Many times a boss will call me and say, "I'll have to let you go," and I'll say why, and they'll say, "Well, you sell more than everybody else at the plant, but you've been saying oligarchy in the break room too much at lunch." In fact, the suggestion box is filled with pieces of paper that complain about that. And I'll say, "Well sir, oligarchy, holy fuck," and then I know it's time to pack up my duffel bag and hit the lonely road. I like chicken and crepes.
Have you ever considered bringing back Turd Ferguson and giving him his own TV show?
Ha ha ha. What are the chances that question would come up? Someone should write a Smokey and the Bandit sequel and have me in it doing Burt Reynolds. It seems like it would be illegal, but I think it would be amazing.
Norm, I followed your Twitter book club and was wondering who were your favorite Spanish language authors and / or which authors you would like to read. Also, what's on your now reading list? P.S. I am rooting for a late Norm show. Who would like your first guest to be?
Servants. I found Don Quixote transformative. I mean, I never read anything like that before. Well, I'm reading this Norwegian guy and I can't remember his goddamn name. I'm trying to remember. I know what it's called. The book is called My Struggle by Carol Ove Norsgaard. No wonder I couldn't remember it. The title is even very daring, but it's an unflinching look into mortality, which I like to do. I like to look into mortality in an unflinching manner. Some days, I'll flinch. Some days I'll be honest with you, Victoria. I'll stare into my own mortality in that abyss. I'll flinch. But I can't say the same for Jorge Vase Badlibard. I'm sure he flinches too, but he writes it down and pretends he's not flinching. Because that's what I did when I was writing my book. Haha, the old Braille typewriter. I find that words can be much more powerful than their creators. Words are brave and strong and true in your memoir, and then you go look at yourself in the mirror, and the flinching begins. Well, if I ever got any talk show on any network, the first thing I would do, the first guest I would get, is one of those politicians up from Washington Way. And I often say, Victoria, that we could solve our energy crisis by getting the hot air to come out of Washington and bottle that somehow. Anyways, I'd get that politician on a TV show beside me, and I'd start skewering. And finally I'd puncture that blowhard, until he popped like a balloon.
Did you ever meet Carrot Top after your infamous Conan appearance?
Oh yes. Because one time I was on Conan, and I made fun of Carrot Top. I didn't do it on purpose, but this girl said she was in a Carrot Top movie, which sort of shocked me when she said it. I reacted the same way anyone would upon finding out that Carrot Top had movie. Anyways, they didn't tell me that, but by the way, but later they were going to invent something where this would live forever. They forgot to tell me that. So I met Scott after that. He was a really nice guy. I already knew him and apologized. So it was funny.
If it's got Carrot Top in it, you know what a good name for it would be?
What's that, Norm?
Box office poison.
There's this movie coming out.
Yes.
Title undetermined at this point.
Chairman of the board.
Oh, all right. Do something with that, you freak.
I bet the board is spelled B-O-R-E-D.
Loved the Norm show. What in your opinion went wrong with A Minute with Stan Hooper?
Oh, well, I thought A Minute with Stan Hooper was the best thing I ever did outside of stand-up comedy. But Fox didn't stay with the show. It was a show that was intended to turn very dark. Like at the end of the first season, it was set up like a homespun show. And then at the end of the first season my wife was going to be slaughtered by the town barber that we'd come to love as a kind of a funny old fella. Anyways, turned out he was a psychosexual sadist, but they never let us get to the end. So you never got to see my plan. And I'm not saying anything against psychosexual sadists. I just think oftentimes, you know, they'll slaughter innocents, and I'm no fan of that.
Norm. You once recalled a story about when you were a very shy and very young boy and had to take your dad's friend, who was blind, to a store. The blind friend requested that you describe the world around him, what the grass was like, the street lights, etc. The friend was happy and loved that you were describing such things to him. You said for the first time this made you look outward at the world, not inward, and that you fell into a kind of hysteria, laughing uncontrollably. Another time you were talking to a homeless guy who was saying he knew John D. Rockefeller, was at John D. Rockefeller's funeral and all this insane stuff, and again you fell deep into laughter. I had a similar experience when I was a shy kid and stole a bag of candy from a drugstore. My mom found out and made me return it, and I couldn't stop laughing at the idea of bringing it back up to someone who worked there. On the way back I was in tears from laughing so much. My mom was actually a little worried. I had laughed so much it hurt. I had completely lost all control. I remember thinking about how I took this candy from someone else, in a way, and it wasn't for me. This world has other people who see and want things too. For whatever reason my reaction to that was to laugh, and in addition to being less self-absorbed and nervous, I found a lot of everyday things to be funny from that point on. My question is, do those memories of the blind friend and homeless man still mean something to you? And do you think they have had an effect on the way you think about things now? I felt a kinship when I heard you tell those stories, they meant a lot to me and I wanted you to know that. Thank you.
I found that story you told me very moving. Well, there was a hysteria, I can't really remember it right now. Maybe it's called Stendhal syndrome, and I think there was someone named Stendhal, where he was overcome by the beauty of the artwork in his gallery and the world. When I was young I used to be overcome by life, and I was overcome just now hearing your story, because that is quite a moving story about the candy. It quite gets to me. Anyhow.
When's the first time you remember making someone laugh?
When I was a young boy, I studied high math, because I was put way ahead in school. So I was doing college. When I was 9 years old, I was very good at math, very shy. And then the professor of calculus said the next theory we are going to learn if A, then A equals A, if A, then A equals A. And he said, what do you think the name of this theory is? And I said, is it the pointless theory? And he was fantastic to work with.
How do you tell a story? Does it come naturally for you or do you have some guidelines?
Well, I know how you don't tell a story saying the ending part first, because that's what my mother does all the time, and that's what people sometimes do in the audience, where they'll yell out do the joke where the thing at the end happens. You know how they always say a story has to have a beginning, middle and an end? Well, I find that, if you have a beginning and an end, you don't really need a middle. Why waste time with a middle? Whoever goes, you know what part of the movie I liked? The middle. That long part between the beginning and the end. That is no one's favorite part. Although I worked on the middle, and it was a fine show.
Norm. How is Artie doing? Is he gonna be on the Norm Macdonald live podcast internet show?
Yes, he is eventually going to be. He had to cancel the first time, because of diabetic shock, for those of you not listening earlier.
Hello Norm. How do you think the internet will change comedy? How do you think it will change entertainment in general? Do you think the ability to independently upload anything you create is a good thing? Goodbye.
I think the big problem with the internet, when it comes to comedy, is it requires too much content, and supply and demand does not work with comedy, and success goes to the ones that give the most content, but the content would be, there'll be a precise algorithm between amounts and mediocrity of content. So that's how I think the internet demands too much input of a comedian, and the successful ones will be the worst ones. I'm doing Jash, a video podcast, which is like a TV show, that is only on the computer, and it's about time there was a place to put TV shows other than the TV, I've always said.
Hi Norm, first off you are easily the funniest person on the planet. I was wondering if you were still in possession of old Alec Major Eisen, the enthusiastic Holocaust denier puppet?
Oh yes, Alec Majorison. That whole thing was unfortunate, Victoria. What happened was I bought a puppet that was originally belonged to Edgar Bergen, and he was a crusty old fella. He was a curmudgeon, ya know. Well, pretty early on it became clear to me that he was a vehement Holocaust denier. But this is the point I'm trying to make, he's just plain wrong. And you know, I know he was born in a different time, but he's just plain wrong. He's in a musty old suitcase in my basement. And that's where he'll stay.
And then there's one puppet that's no good at all. That's he's an old guy and he's cranky about everything, right? Yeah, but also he doesn't believe the Holocaust happened.
Who do you consider under-recognized for how funny he/she is/was?
The funniest person I've ever met is Bob Uecker, so he'd probably be the most underrated. You're looking that up, Victoria. Uecker is probably the easiest game next to tic-tac-toe.
Hey, you got any gum?
That's an unanswerable question. That is just one of those unanswerable questions. Oh wait, I do.
You got any gum? You got any gum?
Hello Norm. What does an OL chunk of coal like you get out of reading some of the great Russian novelists? Any recommendation on where to start? You are undeniably one of the best stand-ups and my favorite, for what it's worth.
That's nice. Well, if you really want to read Russian novelists, you should learn to speak Russian. That's the best way. But if you don't want to do that, there are wonderful translators, a husband and wife team by the name of Richard Pevier and Larisa Volokonsky. They are the greats. So even if you've already read Russian literature, you should reread. I would begin with a book of Tolstoy short stories. There's a book called The Death of Ivan Ilovich and Other Stories, which is a jumping off point. And not ironically at all, but it's very funny writing.
My other boy, Gregorio Ivanilidovich. I no longer love him.
Norm, you've been my hero since I was a kid. You're honestly my favorite comedian of all time. I can't wait for more of the podcast. I know you love Letterman, and I know Ferguson is leaving. My question is, why haven't they given you his job yet?
Well, seriously, they have a lot of great candidates to look into, and not all of them live on this side of the globe. I'm sure they'll make a fine decision, and if they don't, they'll pick someone else.
Hey Norm, any chance you could join CBS broadcast of the Masters next year? Love your golf commentary. Also, I hope you get the Late Late Show. Craig was great and I am bummed he'd left, but you'd be a great replacement. Good luck.
Oh, I would love to do any golf broadcast that would have me. I'm probably going to run a simulcast with the US Open on the computer, so you can hear me going while you watch.
Any plans to write another movie? We'd kill for another outing with you and Artie Lang. I guess you could invite Sajid too.
I dunno. I finished writing my book, and I started writing another book, because I think I like writing books. I'm writing a children's book, Victoria, and it's about a boy. You know how all little children are different? You know how the beautiful thing is about little children are all being different? Well, this is about a little boy who is the same. That's what the book's about. And I think there's a bidding war right now, but I believe it will be either HarperCollins or self-published. So down to us too.
Norm, love ya. One question, do you have an estimate as to when your book coming out?
Well, it's already written, but I realize there's a lot more to a book than simply writing it. There's the book binding, there's the paper cutting, there's the printing, there's the dedication, and hoping someone close to me expires soon, the massive bibliography, and appendix, which I've taken out, there's the illustration, all of this I'm responsible for. I didn't read the fine print. I can't read actually, which is another troublesome part. It's hard for me to rewrite, because I can't read what I've written.
Norm, I knew you were a fellow Canadian, but I didn't realize you were born in Quebec City. How's your French? Comment CAVA?
Cavabine.
From Rusty's Juicy Chicken Hole to the Jack Lloyd Fan Club, to you eating kibble, Screwed is one of the best comedies of the early 2000s. Any good stories about making that one?
Trying to think of a good story. I remember one amazing day when Dave Chappelle didn't smoke weed. And it was great to work with Chappelle. He is just the funniest guy ever. I saw Elaine Stritch in a girdle one day, and 2 years later, I returned to having sex. She was fantastic to work with. I say that at the end of every story.